Hello, life-changing friends. I'm today talking about the book It's Not You by Ramona Durvasula, published by Vermillion earlier this year, February 2024. And I wanted to read this one because narcissism is everywhere on the web right now, apparently. And this author has done a huge number of interviews on YouTube, and I've watched a couple of them, and I was not sure from hearing her talk what the direction of this book would be, because it seems important to me that a person writing about this subject should not be hooking people in just to reinforce their own divisive ideas, like their own black and white thinking about their own relationships, because it's very tempting to, when you're going through an extremely traumatic emotional change in your life, to blame it all on the other person. and and labeling them a narcissist without being really clear about what that is, may destroy a relationship that was redeemable, or it may make it really difficult for you to see the parts of your own behaviour that may have led you to have a relationship with a difficult person in the first place, or I don't know, find it difficult to leave. And so I went into reading this book with that question in my mind. The author is I believe, an academic psychologist and also a therapist. And the introduction to the book was also clear that she has had her own experience of more than one narcissistic relationship. And in the introduction, I wasn't reassured, I have to say, but do listen to the end of this one, because it really is a different book from what I expected. So, or what I feared, anyway. So by the end of the introduction, it seemed to me that a lot of what she was talking about was from her experience as a therapist, hearing people talk about their partner, but never actually meeting the partner, right? So, which, as we know, is inevitably going to be misleading. And it also, it had no balance to it. The introduction was saying, there's a lot of writing and a lot on YouTube about narcissism, and a lot in the academic psychology arena, which is about the narcissists themselves, right? And people with narcissistic traits or narcissistic personality disorder, and trying to figure them out. But there wasn't very much about the the people who were in relationship with them and what they could do. And she quite rightly talked about how other people's attitudes, including professionals, can be very, very unhelpful for people who are going through abuse of this kind. Okay, so so as I said, it appeared to be all very one-sided, and I was already thinking, oh no, it's going to be one of those books, a kind of a victim support kind of a book. However, it isn't. It is very authoritative, very well structured, very warm and balanced book. Right at the beginning, she is extremely clear about the group of people she's talking about the group who have been or are currently in a relationship with somebody who has moderate narcissistic traits, and she is really clear about what that means and what it doesn't mean, which is refreshing. So there are kind of two main take-home messages that I got from this book, like the big overview messages. The first was what I've just said, that this is a book for people who have suffered from narcissistic type behaviour and abuse, and it's not about the abuser. It's about what the behaviours do to the person, to the psychology and the other aspects of the person's life when they have a relationship with this kind of person. Even to the extent that she's very clear, and thank goodness, that they don't need to have a diagnosis. What matters is the behaviours. Excuse me. And which of course is the truth, isn't it? You know, labelling somebody is irrelevant if their behaviour is harming you. So what the book does is it briefly describes and outlines clearly who she's talking about, and then she talks about the behaviours themselves, which are abusive. She talks about how that relates, how that behaviour relates to normal relationships, and she also goes on to speak about the consequences, the psychological and life consequences of living with somebody who has those behaviours. And she is very, very clear, which is wonderful, that you don't actually have to have anything wrong with you to start with in order to suffer from bad behaviours towards you. And this is something that is not necessarily obvious. So what it reminds me of is there used to be an idea that if you joined a cult, then there must be something vulnerable about you. And in fact, there was a very beautiful study done by somebody whose name I can't remember. I have an idea if she was a professor of sociology, and maybe I'll put her details and the study, the details in the comments perhaps. But anyway, so it was done in the 70s or 80s, and she discovered for the first time that anybody had tested it properly that that the people who get drawn into cults are no weirder than the general population. And I think that is probably usually true of people in narcissistic relationships. And that is somewhat contentious, I guess. So I say usually true because the standard psychological idea is that somebody who will accept and conform and stay in an emotionally abusive relationship must have some problem beforehand. And it does appear that there is a group of people who have very poor ego strength, or they don't really know who they are, or they've got a very strange idea of what a good love relationship is like, perhaps because they had a very strange upbringing. And there is quite a lot in this book which refers to such things, and I think that's very helpful. And then she goes on to talk about how you can recover from such things. And she knows because she's done it herself. And she also knows because she is a therapist and has done a lot of study on the subject. And I really liked the way she went about it, about talking about recovery from the point of view of different kinds of relationships, parental relationships, work relationships, and love relationships, and even relationships with children with narcissistic behaviours. And I also really appreciated that there was nothing simplistic about it. It wasn't like, just buy my program and you'll get better. It was nuanced. It was quite comprehensive. It was talking about people who have left, people whose abusers are dead, people who are still in a relationship for one very good reason or another, or because they are not yet strong enough to leave. And yeah, I like that. So there are a couple of other things that I wanted to say about this book. So one is that the language is quite advanced, I'd say. So I've written down some of the words she used somewhere. I can't find them, but you know, they're polysyllabic words that are kind of master's level English. And so if you're not an English speaker very fluently, or if your educational level is not high, then you might find that the language is actually quite difficult to get through. So that may put you off, or you may decide to learn some new words. having said that, she has some really lovely turns of phrase and imagery that she uses to describe some of the classical situations that occur in these kind of relationships. So yes, the relationship consisted of you perpetually dropping a bucket in an empty well, and every so often you bring up some water, but otherwise it's a whole lot of empty buckets. The narcissistic relationship is like a riptide that pulls you back in even as you try to swim away. Oh yes, so I've found my words. So I said emotional thermostat, dynamics, a slow devolution, dissociation through numbing. These are all things that they're not technical terms exactly, but they're quite long words. Right. So, and all the way through, there are simple ways of, firstly, helping you understand that it is not you, and secondly, by giving you a bit of a structure to help you move on with your life. And yeah, as you can tell, I thought 5 stars for this. Anyone who is able to read the language, I would say it's warm, it's complex, but delivered in an absorbable way with authority and great tact. And I highly recommend it. Okay, so who's it for? It's for anyone who is confused about whether it's them. So the title is a really, it's not just a marketing title. It's a really useful title because I think it will draw people who have the absolutely central confusion about what's going on and who is to blame. And then it will help them to sort it out. Secondly, profundity. So I think, it's not simplistic, it's not superficial, it has depth, complexity, and so I'm going to give it quite a deep lake. What's quite a deep lake? Lake Erie. It's not woo-woo in any way. It's not spiritual, right? It's not spiritual. It is from the psychotherapy way of thinking. Although some of what she says is not entirely mainstream. But the thinking, the way of thinking, the directions for recovery are all very much mainstream psychotherapy. Who is it for? I think I've said already. Yeah, I have. Anyone who's wondering if it's them. And is it useful? And I would say if you can read it and use it and allow yourself the time and the really quite difficult emotional thinking that is required, then I'd say 90% will benefit greatly. And I can't remember what the last thing is on my thing, on my scorecard, but yeah, a big tick from me. So encouraged by this one, I've decided that the next book that I'm going to review is called A Cult of One, and it's by another narcissism YouTuber called Richard Grannon. And I'm really, he's very good talker, and I suspect that it's going to be a really good read. So if you want to join me, please do in reading it. And in the meantime, I would love your comments in the comments, and I will do my best to respond to them if required. So happy reading. Bye to you.